Today we're going to continue in this series, and we are going to be talking about grace is greater than time. See, God has the ability to redeem time. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you just feel like you're running out of time? You feel like it's too late. I remember being a kid, I had some birthday money, okay? I had some money left over, and I heard an ice cream truck coming down the street. This is not the first time, and won't be the last time that I preached about an ice cream truck, people. But I wanted some ice cream, and I was going to bless my brother. So I had some money, but I couldn't find the money, and the truck is coming, and I can hear it. The music's getting louder and louder, and I began to panic because I'm pulling drawers open. I'm looking under the bed. I'm moving clothes. Come on, we were two guys sharing a room, so you can imagine that room was pretty crazy, and I couldn't find my money. So I hear that the truck's right outside our window going by. I tell my brother, Sam, run out there, man. Stop the ice cream truck. I'll be right there. Finally, I find my money. And as I'm running down the hall and I'm approaching the front door swings open, and I can see the disappointment in my brother's face, and he says this, it's too late. He's gone. And I remember peeking my head out of that front door, and I could see the taillights were already down the street. How many of you have ever felt that experience? Not just with an ice cream truck. Come on, I'm just using that as an example. But in life, you feel as though the ship has sailed. You feel like the train's left the depot. You feel like the ice cream truck is heading for the next block in life. You've missed it. It's too late. Have you ever felt that way in life? Well, today this message is for you. I believe that God is going to bring hope and healing into your life as a result of you spending this time with us as the Holy Spirit speaks. You see, the term too late means that mentally we've established a start line and a finish line for something. And that there's a clock that's ticking, or you feel as though there's a window or a door that's closing, that there is an expiration date on your life and on the things that God has called you to. But let me tell you this today, that God's grace overrides any expiration dates that we put on anything. See, often we don't consult God about those timelines. There's this mental clock inside her going, it's running out, it's running out, it's running out, it's getting too late. I should be married by now. I should have kids by now. I should have my career locked in by now. I should have my ministry locked in right now. And you feel this anxiety and this pressure because you feel as though it's too late. It's too late. It's like the window, the door's closing. I got to slide under there in the last moment. But I'm here today with the message of hope to just simply tell you that God's grace is greater than time. That God can do more in a moment than we could ever do in a lifetime. And so we need to know this today. And how is it that God is greater than time? It's because he's not controlled by it. God is not subject to the constraints of time. God lives outside of time. Listen to what Isaiah 57:15 has to say. It says, for thus says the high and lofty one who inhabits eternity, whose name is holy. He inhabits eternity. God is not moving to being eternal. He already lives in eternity. But yet he is so mindful of us and loves us so much that he is very attentive to this world that we live in that is constrained by time. But listen to what 2 Peter 3:8 has to say. It says, but beloved, do not forget this one thing, that with the Lord, one day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years as one day. What he's saying is to God, a day could be anything that he wants it to be. That God is not controlled by this, that God is not confined by the 60 seconds that make up a minute, or those 60 minutes that make up an hour, or those 24 hours that make up a day, or those 7 days that make up a week, or the months or the years, the decades, the centuries. God is not controlled by any of that. And that's what should allow us to say, you know what, if he's not controlled by it, he's more powerful than it, and whatever he does, whatever he wants to do, that's what's going to happen. And see, last week we defined grace as God's sovereign and divine ability to get the job done on our behalf when we can't do it. Let me say that again. That grace is God's sovereign and divine ability to get the job done on our behalf when we can't do it. And see, when we find ourselves in that place of saying, it's too late. This relationship's too broken. Friendships have been severed. We've got mountains of debt. How will we ever get out of this? It's just too late. That's where God's grace rushes in and says, listen, I'm going to do more for you in a moment than you'll be able to do on your own in a lifetime. Guys, that is such great news. And that's why I say to you today, and this is what Jesus said In Matthew 19:26, he says, "But Jesus looked at them and said to them, with men, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible." So what I say to you today, if it's too late, yeah, it's impossible for you. Yeah, it's impossible for me. But with God on our side, with his grace, which is greater, all things are possible. So let me encourage you with this. It's never too late to say sorry and see God mend a broken relationship. It's never too late to experience the healing power of God's touch on your life. It's never too late to break the chains of addiction. It's never too late to see God's promises fulfilled in your life. It's never too late to see your prodigal sons and daughters come home. It's never too late for you single folks to find that godly spouse. It's never too late for you married folks out there to rekindle that passion and that fire that you once had for one another. It's never too late to see that mountain of debt be thrown into the sea. Why? Because grace is greater than time. God doesn't need years and decades to work on your behalf. It's in a moment that something can happen. And my question to you today is, do you believe it? Do you have the faith to believe that God can do what you've been believing for forever in a moment? Come on, let's activate our faith and let's see some tremendous change. Veronica and I, we had the privilege of hanging out with some really good friends of ours this past week, and they were sharing this incredible story with us. And it was this: they had a debt that they couldn't pay. And year after year, it would just accrue more. It was just rapidly growing all the way up to the tune of, I believe it was $80,000. Come on, guys, that's a big debt when you got $80,000 of debt. And there was no promise of it coming down because every year, because of interest, it was going to grow and grow and grow. And they shared with us that inside their hearts, they're just like, you know what, we just have to accept it. Accept the fact that we'll probably never pay this off, that this is always going to be on our credit report, and that it was influencing and affecting their ability to move forward financially. But yet they had just resigned and said, you know what, it just is what it is. But it's when God's grace kicked in that something powerful, something life-changing that happened. That when God showed that his grace was greater than time, there is a story that will be told for generations, and it's being told today, and this is going to bless you. God orchestrated something to where it took them $2,500 in a week's time, and $80,000 of debt was wiped clean. Come on, guys. If you're hearing this right now and that excites you, can we make some noise for Jesus online today? Guys, I'm so pumped with this story, with this testimony. Why? Because our God's grace is so powerful that what they couldn't have done in years and decades, man, God showed up and just boom, in a moment, changed the course of their life. God completely freed them of that debt, that bondage, that weight, that anxiety, that stress that they were carrying. It was all lifted off in a moment. Why? Because of God's grace, his sovereign and divine ability to get the job done when we can't do it. They couldn't do it, but God could. Gosh, man, that fires me up, man. I'm excited today to preach this message. And my question to you today is, what is it that is staring you in the face and is screaming at you right now and saying, it is too late? What is it that is in your ear that's going, it's too late? You missed your opportunity. For all of us, it may be something different, but I'm here to say that although the voice may be different, the solution is the same. And the solution is the grace of God moving on your behalf. I want to take you to a story today it's of a man who, it was too late. It was too late. 38 years of being paralyzed, hoping for a healing, and it never came. For 38 years, every day he'd get up with the hope that it can be different, hope that today is the day. And then he has an encounter with the grace of God. He has an encounter with the person of Jesus. Bam. And everything changed. Would you go with me to John chapter 5? We're going to start in verse 2. We're going to read through verse 9 today. It says this. Inside the city near the sheep gate was the pool of Bethesda with 5 covered porches, crowds of sick people, blind, lame, and paralyzed, laying on the porches. One of the men lying there had been sick for 38 years. When Jesus saw him and knew he had been ill for a long time, he asked him, "Would you like to get well?" What a crazy question, right? To somebody who's gone to these pools of healing for 38 years. Well, we'll get to that. The man responds, "I can't, sir," the sick man said, "for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me." Jesus told him, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." Instantly, the man was healed. He rolled up his sleeping mat and began walking. What an interesting story of healing right here. I think first off, it's really kind of crazy that Jesus would ask him, "Do you want to be made well?" I think that's an interesting question to ask somebody who has gone there, as I mentioned, every single day for 38 years with an expectation of, hey, today could be the day. Today could be the day that I get into the water and that I'm healed. See, let me give you a little bit of background on this. Is that in the New King James Version, the scribes added something that you may not see in a lot of the other versions, and it's this, that when the angel would come down and stir the waters, whoever the first person was to get into the water would receive their healing. So that's why he's saying that when the waters would bubble up and it was time to get healed, he's like, I had nobody to help me get in. So all he had was expectation, a hope that something would be different, but it never was. And at this point, here he is, having gone to this pool of healing for 38 years, and it just seems like it's too late. Like, is anything ever going to change? Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like, gosh, man, I just feel like I'm just in this feedback loop and just nothing ever changes, always the same. Same issues, same problems, same challenges. Well, today is a day of hope. As there was hope for this man, there's hope for you, my friend. But I think it's an odd question that Jesus asks him, and he says, "Do you want to be made well?" For some of us, we would think that would demand a sarcastic reply, from the guy, "Nah, I don't want to be healed. I'm just out here working on my tan." Like maybe that would be his response. Maybe that'd be some of our responses. We become so cynical because we're so discouraged because we've been waiting so long. But the longer that I've been in ministry, I realized why Jesus would answer or ask this question. Do you want to be made well? The reason he asked this question is because not everybody wants to be made well. See, there's a lot of people who want to lay around the pool, but they don't want to be healed. There's a lot of people who come to church, but they don't really want to change. There are a lot of people who will open their Bibles or listen to a message, but they're not interested in doing anything different. A lot of people right now, they don't want to give up their poolside lifestyle. And that's why Jesus is asking. Because sometimes the ailments that we have in our lives, those kinds of things, they actually serve us. But what Jesus is saying, in order for you to receive your healing, you must be willing to part with those things. You must be willing to part with that poolside lifestyle. And for 38 years, this guy had embraced this lifestyle of being around all these sick people, hoping to find his healing. But let me say this, and for those of you that are taking notes, you need to write this down today, is that we don't work for God's grace, but we work with it. Let me say it again, is that we don't work for God's grace, but we work with it. And I'm going somewhere with this. Because see, God's gift of grace, that is greater than time, it's like a gift that's been given to you, and it's at your disposal. You have it and it's ready to be used. But often we get that gift, and you know what we do? It's kind of like a gift that we don't fully understand. I don't know if you ever received one of those gifts for Christmas or for your birthday. You're kind of like, oh, what is this? And so you just kind of leave it in the bag. You leave it wrapped. You don't really open it up. You don't use it. Well, listen, grace is like that. That God is lavishing you with his grace, but when we don't know how to apply it, when we don't even use it or take it out of the box, it has little, or let me just say this, it has no effect on our lives. And so we don't work to earn God's grace because there's this unlimited resource of grace that he's lavishing us with. But yet, we have to remember this, is that sometimes we're blocking the grace. Why? Because we're not even opening it up. We're not even accessing it because it's not on our mind. And so today we're going to learn how to activate that grace that is greater than time in our lives. Like the story I shared with you earlier with the debt being canceled. How many of you would like to experience that in your life? How many of you would like to have that breakthrough with that healing in your body? How many of you would like to have that breakthrough with that healing in your marriage? Listen, today it can happen, and it can happen in a moment by the grace of God, but you have to be willing to access it. And part of accessing something is taking the constraints and the limitations off of it, taking the package off of it. And sometimes, guys, we learn more by what not to do than being told what to do. And so today I'm going to give you 3 things that actually limit God's grace moving in our lives. 3 things that kind of are that package that needs to come off. Get that packaging, get that box off of it so you can unwrap that gift and let that thing impact your life forever. So number 1 is this. Okay, I'm going to give you 3 things today that we need to be mindful of that actually block the grace of God in our lives. The first one is this, it's the fear of change. It's the fear of change. So looking at this story, you have this guy that's laid around a pool. He shows up there for 38 years. And he does the same thing. He probably lays in the same spot. He probably sees the same people. The same people have seen him. He's a familiar face there. It's almost like he's furniture there. Okay, everybody knows him. He knows them. He knows how everything's going to go. He's actually kind of comfortable because he knows what to expect. He knows that the angel's going to come and stir the waters. He knows that everybody's going to try to fight to get in there first. And it's just become his life. But here's the thing is that it wasn't a great life, but at least it was a life. It was predictable. He knew what to expect. And some of us, that's how we live. It's like, it's not a great marriage that we have, but at least it's a marriage. You know, I don't really see a great future ahead, but I've got a future. It's not great, but at least it's a future. And we settle often. We settle for what we see when we're growing up. We settle and just accept things because it's what we're used to. It's not the best for us, but it's what we know. And even if it isn't great, there are some benefits to laying by the poolside. And that's our mindset. That some of us have become so accustomed to our lives that we don't know how to break out. And today I'm trying to show you, I'm trying to compel you through the word of God to say, man, there is so much more for you. There is so much more for you. The grace of God wants to come in and overpower all those lost years, those 38 years of wasting away by laying next to the pool. And for some of you, you have a different kind of pool, and you've been wasting time, years and days and months and weeks, doing the same thing over and over, hoping for a different result. And today, God is going to unleash his grace upon you. As I mentioned earlier, though, that often our ailments, they serve us. When it comes to change, when I was in high school, Veronica and I, we were dating. We had just kind of started dating, in those early years, and we loved sports. And I remember I had a pretty bad knee injury. I hurt my left knee, and but here's the thing: is I walked around on crutches for a while, and I had bandages. But you know what? Something happened when I got hurt. Although I was in pain and I needed healing, I kind of liked it, to be honest. I know it sounds kind of weird. Why did I like it? Because Veronica was more attentive to me. I noticed that she was a lot kinder to me. I noticed that she was, one that she would come alongside and like, hey, are you okay? I remember getting a get well card from her during this time. And I was like, hey, this is kind of nice. So my ailment actually brought attention to me. My ailment actually brought sympathy to me. And it also lowered the standard, lowered the expectations from me. Because, hey, who expects the guy to run around? He's on crutches. Give him a break. And often what happens, guys, in our lives is that we do live with those ailments. We live with those crutches. And I know this seems really real, and I know that I'm in your face a little bit today. And I'm trying to do this as kind and as life-giving as possible, but it needs to be said, my friend, that some of us, this is why Jesus says, do you want to be made well? Because there's some of us that we're hanging on to those things, and it's scary to part ways with those things. It may not be a great life, but it's what we've known. It may not be the best for us, but it's just what I'm comfortable with. I'm used to that sympathy. I'm used to, the low standards, the low expectations. People are like, oh, it's just not well. Oh, this is not right. And we just let it go and we live with that. And the thought of actually getting up and picking up your mat and walking and moving on to something else is actually kind of scary. Because you've never been there. You never lived that healed life. You don't know what it's like to be restored and to have your mind renewed by Jesus. You don't know what it's like to have your heart healed and not be bitter anymore. And although there's something inside of you that is compelling you to say, yes, I want to get up. Yes, I want to pick up my mat. Yes, I want to walk. But there's this other part of you that's saying, yeah, but in order for me to do that, I have to part ways with what I've always known. I have to part ways with these things. And I'm not really sure that I can change. I'm not sure that I even really want to change. I kind of used to, I got my spot and I know my people. I know what's going to happen. Listen, that will block the grace of God in your life to redeem time, my friend. So don't be afraid of change. Listen, God will never lead you to a place that is worse. Man, God is so good that he's saying, listen, I want to heal you, redeem you, restore you. Come on, let's get up. Let's get going. Don't let that fear of change block the grace of God moving in your life. The second thing is this, that we see in this story, is that a denial of reality will block the grace of God moving in your life. That it'll block that grace that is greater than time. See, 38 years of being sick, he kind of lost touch with what life really had to offer because his world got really small. It was just him, and it was just that little world of being sick. It was that little world of being there by the poolside with all these other sick people, with all these other people that had a lot of problems. That became his world. But that wasn't reality. God had so much more for him. That when God created him, God had intentions of him being healthy and whole. God knew that he was going to heal him and that he was going to rise and walk, that he was going to take that sleeping mat and he was going to walk over to the temple. My goodness, like that's such a great thing. And it's the same for you, that God has great plans for your life, but you've got to believe it. You've got to receive that here today. And don't deny the reality. That was the thing, is that he couldn't see really what was out there for them. He was trapped up in this world that he was living in. You know, recently I was watching this documentary, and it was of this 34-year-old woman. Guys, she had a tumor that had grown to over 300 pounds. I believe it was 303 pounds was the actual size of this tumor. And I remember thinking, like, how did she get here? How does anybody get to a place where they have a tumor that's almost twice the weight of what she was before she had the actual tumor? How do you get to that place? And what it was, as you heard the story, is she was afraid to go outside. She was afraid to get help. And in her mind, she thought if she just gave it time that it would get better. That if I don't do anything about it, this thing's going to work itself out and I'm going to get better and I'll be okay. But over time, it just continued to grow and grow and grow. And this thing took over her entire life. And I say the same thing to you today, is you can't deny reality, guys. Is that if your marriage is struggling, just not dealing with it and just giving it time is not going to fix it. If your finances and your spending are out of control, you just giving it more time, it's not going to fix it. If your relationship with God, you feel distant from him and you are actually pulling away instead of pushing in and pressing into the things of God, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And you'll find yourself with these massive tumors, these massive problems, because they've grown and they've grown and they've grown because you haven't taken the time to hit them head on with the grace of God and to deal with them. And what ends up happening, and what happened with this woman, and one of the reasons that she didn't seek help after a while, is she was embarrassed because that tumor had grown so big that she didn't want anybody to see it anymore. She didn't want anybody to help because, oh man, like they were going to judge her. And how many of us has that happened in our lives? We have failed to deal with things, and then now we're saying to ourselves, it's too late to deal with it. It's too embarrassing. Some of us were in a place like, I can't believe how bad my marriage has become. Some of us saying, I can't believe how out of control my anger has become. I can't believe how out of control my debt is. And now we're embarrassed, and we feel like we can't go and get help because we're ashamed of people knowing that our problem is so far out of control. Guys, I'm here to tell you today, don't deny the reality of what is happening, but reach out for help, guys. That is the way. See, what we see with this guy in John chapter 5, verse 7, he says, I can't. When Jesus said, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be made well? He says, I can't, sir. The sick man said, for I have no one to put me into the pool when the water bubbles up. Someone else always gets there ahead of me. In his mind, he was thinking, like, this is the way that I'm going to get healed. This is the only way, is for me to get into that water. And the sad part is he's saying, listen, I can't. I can't. And the truth is that we can't heal ourselves. We need God's help. And the other sad part here is that he says, I have no one. Guys, today, if you're denying reality of what's going on and you're just letting time pass instead of dealing with it, would you just pray for God's courage to come upon you, to be able to stand up and face reality for what it is, that some things need to change, that some different decisions need to be made. But here's the thing is I will promise you this, is that you will not say what this guy said. I have no one. Here at Hub City Church, guys, we are here for you. If you're struggling right now through things and you need help, we're kicking off small groups here just in a few weeks. Go to hubcitychurch.live right after church. Don't hesitate, because the enemy's going to talk you out of it. Go there right away like you're on a mission and sign up for a small group. Click the small group tab and get signed up and get some people around you that are going to help you heal. They're going to be a safe place for you to talk out the things that are going on. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to criticize you. They're not going to say, wow, man, you've really let yourself go. Wow, you've really let your marriage go. Wow, you let your finances go. No, they're going to come alongside you and speak life into you and challenge you and motivate you to step forward into all that God has for you. Don't hide out. Don't deny reality. Why? Because that is going to block the grace of God being able to come into your life and make all things new, guys. Come on, let's move forward in this. And here's the last and final one. This will block the grace of God being greater than time in your life. And it's this, is that you cannot be afraid of action. You can't be afraid of action. See, Jesus told him in John 5:8, he says, Jesus told him, stand up, pick up your mat and walk. Jesus was calling him to action. There's 3 action verbs in one sentence there. And with healing comes action. See, he could have healed them and the guy just laid there by the pool and was like, yeah, hey, thanks for the healing, Jesus. I'll see you later. No, but Jesus was calling him. When you're healed, he's calling you to get up and to start moving, to do something that you couldn't do before. And there has to be a shift in the inside of us to where we're not afraid of action. I know so many people, I've talked to men, guys that I've worked with throughout the years, and I had one guy tell me something, and man, it just blew my mind. He said, you know what, Pastor Steve, I don't pray. I don't ever pray. And I was like, really? Why not? And he was so honest with me, and it baffled me, but yet it cleared my eyes to see something that I'd never seen before. He said, I don't pray because I'm afraid that God's going to tell me to do something. And I was like, whoa, like this is crazy. But you know what? I venture to say he's not the only one. That some of us are afraid to pray because we know that God's going to require something of us, and we're afraid of action. And see, we have this paralytic that's laying on the ground. And the difference between his old life and his new life was the fact that he was willing to get up. He was willing to pick up what was there, and he was willing to begin to walk. You know, there's a book, it's kind of a popular book, maybe you've heard of it, and it's this, that happiness is a choice. And in the book, there was this quote from these psychiatrists, and I want to read this to you because it has a lot to do with the actions that we take. It says, as psychiatrists, we cringe whenever Christian patients use the words, I can't and I've tried. Any good psychiatrist knows that I can't and I've tried are merely lame excuses. We insist that our patients stop saying can't and say won't instead. Man, this really jammed me up. This really hit me between the eyes because I realized that often I'll say, you know what, I tried. Or you know what, I tried and I can't do it. But this really changed my perspective as I was reading this, and I hope that it changes yours. And so it looks like this. When someone says, I just can't get along with my wife. You don't say, I just can't get along with my wife. You say, I just won't get along with my wife. When a wife says, you know what, I just can't encourage my husband. I can't bring myself to encourage him. Change your wording and say, I won't encourage my husband. I just can't get my spending under control. Change it and say, I won't get my spending under control. And this is what it says in the book. It says, if you can get people to change their can'ts to won'ts, they'll stop making excuses and start taking some action. Guys, I felt convicted with this, and I wanted to share this with you today because Jesus is calling you and I to action. He's calling us to get up, to pick up, and to start walking. And why is this so important that you start walking? I want to share some powerful verses with you as I close out here. Listen to what Ephesians 5:15-16. This is going to bring so much perspective to you. Ephesians 5:15-16 says, "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise." He's saying when you walk, pay attention to your ways. Pay attention to what you're doing. Listen to this. Verse 16, "Redeeming the time because the days are evil." Let me read this entire verse once more. "See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil." You guys see that right there? There's an action. He's saying as you begin to walk, what are you going to do? You're redeeming the time. What did we talk about at the beginning of this message? Is that God's grace is greater than time. What does redeeming mean? Redeeming means to buy back. And so when God has healed you, when he's restored you, when he's picked you up, what he's done is he's allowed you to begin to walk. And as we walk circumspectly, as we walk with wisdom, it says that the time is being redeemed. So some of you have lost years, some of you have lost decades, some of you have lost months. And what God is saying, listen, if you'll walk in my name, if you'll walk in my healing, I'm going to redeem all of that back to you. Why? Because my grace is greater than time. Listen to what Colossians 4:5 says. It says, "Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time." Are you guys seeing that in these verses? The key word is walk. He's saying there's an action. There's something that you and I need to do. We need to walk in that wisdom that God gives us. And as we do that, the time is being redeemed. Let me just tell you today that it is never too late with God's grace on your side. That his ability to get the job done on your behalf when you can't do it, listen, it is available to you. The question is, are you willing to receive that? My goodness, remember this too, as I shared with you earlier, that we don't work for grace, we work with grace. Let me say it again. We don't work for grace. We're not trying to earn God's grace. We work with it. Like the tool, we're putting it into action. We're using it. Man, this is so good today. So let me just tell you, church, if you feel like it's too late in any area of your life today, I just simply want to pray for you. Can we pray? God, we come before you in all humility, understanding that, God, we are sunk if we're left to ourselves. God, we don't have the answers. We don't have the power. We don't have the strength to endure the things that we're facing. And God, that some of us have become so comfortable laying poolside. But Holy Spirit, would you stir us up today? Would you remind us of your grace and your mercy towards us? God, would you remind us of your love for us, your infinite love? Would you remind us of your understanding and your grace for us, God? Will you remind us that there is nothing too great for you? And God, may we remove all blocks, all packaging, anything that would restrain your powerful, life-changing grace, moving on our behalf to get the job done when we can't. God, would you redeem the time? God, would you redeem the time of marriages that have been cold lately? God, would you redeem the time of those that have been battling addiction and feel as though they've wasted a lifetime away? God, would you redeem the time of broken family relationships where people haven't talked to each other for years, but God, would you redeem it in a way that they would realize it's never too late to say sorry? God, would you redeem the finances of those who have made poor decisions, but yet, God, they have a desire to serve you and to love you and to get back on track. God, would you show mercy on them? God, would you lavish them with your love and your blessings? God, we pray this now in your Son's name. Amen.